Dear students, welcome to the course Biology for Engineers. Myself, Dr. Santhosh Poojary, along with Dr. Chetan DM and Mrs. Loela Govias, will be teaching you this subject. Unit 1 includes membrane biology and engineering principles. Under that, today's topics includes structure and function of cell membrane, passage of water through this cell membrane, and maintenance of osmotic balance. As all of you know, the smallest structural and functional unit of an organism is cell, which is typically microscopic and consists of cytoplasm inside the cell and a nucleus, and which has been enclosed by a cell membrane. Okay, our discussion is more towards this cell membrane. Just look into this picture, which looks like comic picture. Here something you can understand. This picture related to the structure of the cell membrane. You can see some tail like structure, some head like structure here, and some of the structure like this, some more structure like this. Let us see some concept with these structures. The cell membrane is a phospholipid bilayer, phospholipid. Okay, here a concept of hydrophilic head, that means whatever the structure you saw here, it is a head like structure, a hydrophilic head as well as hydrophobic tail is existing. That means you can see this environment as outside the cell, you can call it as outside the cell membrane, and here it is inside the cell. Okay, both these areas are covered with water, and that is how you can see this head like structure, which is we call here, it is actually water loving. That is why the word hydrophilic. Philic is attraction, right? So hydrophobic, these tail like structures are afraid of water. Phobic word refers to afraid. Okay, so you can see this specific arrangement here, and tail like structure are avoiding water, head like structure are liking water. Okay, so this is the fundamental concept in a cell membrane. This cell membrane structure is, as I mentioned, it is a phospholipid bilayer with embedded proteins. Okay, so this model was proposed in 1972 by Singer and Nicholson, that is fluid mosaic model of plasma membrane. According to it, a membrane is a fluid like most of the proteins in the cell membrane, and phospholipid molecules can move laterally like a fluid. So this is the fundamental concept. It has been introduced in this model and it is widely accepted. Okay, a membrane is a mosaic. The second word you can see here, it is mosaic. Proteins and other molecules are in a framework of phospholipids with a proper structure. So that proper structure you can call it as mosaic. So ultimately cell membrane is a fluid mosaic model. Coming to the structure itself, cell membrane consists of phospholipids. these words are repeating, get these technical terms by writing it down or repeating many times, so you will be able to memorize them. Phospholipids, okay, lipids containing phosphate group. Okay, then we have got proteins, whichever the color represents here, blue, you can see the proteins, and carbohydrates, okay, here you can see, and cholesterol, so the bound molecule, you can see cholesterol, and all these molecules are embedded in a framework of phospholipids. The red structure whatever you see here is phospholipid, and specifically if you see this glycolipid and glycoprotein, so the word glyco refers to carbohydrate, and whenever this protein, blue structure you can see here, they are all proteins. Whenever a carbohydrate attaches to this protein, we call that glycoprotein. Whenever a lipid molecule directly, if the lipid, this is a phospholipid bilayer, if a carbohydrate molecule binds here, then we call it as glycolipid. Okay, so these are all the cytoskeleton filaments, integral membrane proteins, peripheral proteins. We will discuss about that in coming slides. So entirely this is a phospholipid bilayer. Okay, the next slide also tells you about this glycoprotein and glycolipid based explanation. So glycoproteins, as I mentioned, it is the proteins with the short chain of carbohydrates attached, and glycolipids are the lipids, phospholipids attached by the carbohydrates in the extracellular side. Get this technical term also, extracellular means outside the cell. Okay, outside the cell membrane you can call. The carbohydrate content of the plasma membrane ranges from 2 to 10% weight. Okay, and approximately protein you may have around 40%. Okay, and lipid is the major percentage. Okay, carbohydrate chain attached here, you can see same thing is been explained. And phospholipids, as I mentioned, looking like this phosphate group attached to this tail like structure, it is nothing but the fatty acids. It is a major structural component of the cell membrane. Proteins are entrenched in this bilayer, already you saw that picture. Most of the function of the membrane is been carried out by these bound proteins. Okay, they have been classified into three categories: integral proteins, peripheral proteins, and lipid anchored proteins. Let us see what they are. Integral proteins, as the name suggests, they are spanning the lipid bilayer. They are also called as transmembrane proteins, and hydrophobic regions, which we discussed already, it's a tail region, consists of one or more stretches of non-polar amino acids. Proteins are made up of amino acids. Definitely non-polar amino acids are hydrophobic. You can see polar means water loving, you can see non-polar not loving water. So you can correlate these amino acids containing non-polar nature will be there in this hydrophobic region. Okay, then you have got another type as peripheral proteins, located entirely outside of the lipid bilayer on either the extracellular, as I mentioned earlier, or the cytoplasmic surface, that is intracellular. That is how the name peripheral. Okay, peripheral can be either extracellular or intracellular, associated with the membrane by weak electrostatic interaction. So this is the weak bond, and you can see this the another type where lipid anchored proteins, you can see they are also proteins which are attached to the lipid bilayer with a strong bond such as covalent bond. Okay, and anyway, these integral proteins are completely spanning the bilayer. Okay, so based on the functions, those proteins of the cell membrane can be classified into carrier or transport proteins, okay, which are facilitating the transport of molecules and ions across the plasma membrane from the exterior to the interior or vice versa. Okay, transport of molecules and ions is very much essential inside the cell and outside the cell, all of you know. Receptor proteins, okay, these proteins when bound by molecules like hormones or signal molecules like neurotransmitters, okay, or any other molecules, they will be inducing a change within the cell by the process called as signal transduction. Ultimately, the proteins which we call as receptor proteins will be receiving some signals, and cell is responding according to it. Okay, and there are other categories of proteins. You can call them marker proteins. Based on these proteins of the plasma membrane, you can identify the cell types or tissue which that cell belongs to. That means these proteins are specific to the cell type. Okay, so that is how you can call them as marker proteins. Coming to that overall function, these proteins are majorly responsible for the function of a cell membrane. And what is this cell membrane is doing for a entire cell? Internal components whatever you see inside the cell. So definitely the cell membrane forms a barrier between the inside of the cell and the environment outside the cell. The cell membrane interacts with the cell membrane of the other adjacent cells. You can see ultimately that itself, interaction between the cell itself is going to be the it is called as one of the function. Okay, so to form tissues, definitely this cell membrane will be helping. Okay, the cell membrane protects the cell from some harmful chemicals. This is another major function from its external environment. Yeah, few more functions. The cell membranes that enclose cells are selectively permeable. Okay, the cell membrane is not allowing all the molecules to move inside and outside. It is selectively allowing some molecule and not allowing some other molecule. So this is the specific property of the cell membrane. So these proteins which are called surface proteins, surface protein markers embedded in the cell membrane will be helping to identify the cell, okay, for us as well as those cells themselves. They can communicate with the other cells by the help of these surface protein markers. Plasma membranes includes as a part of the structural part of their structure contains certain proteins and enzymes. So this is another thing. So you can call this itself is a function of a entire cell membrane, because the proteins involved in the plasma membrane are also utilized for metabolic process. So at that time they are called as enzymes. Okay, all enzymes are proteins, but all proteins are not enzymes. I hope you know this concept. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the membrane proteins and their function. You can call generally it is a cell membrane function itself. So transport, which we already discussed, enzyme activity we just discussed now, and cell surface receptors, right, some signal molecules coming there, and because of that signal transduction process. Cell surface identity markers, some of the proteins which are specific to cell types, and cell adhesion, another thing you can see. Cells, this might be the cell membrane of other cell, and this is another cell, so both of cells can adhere by the help of proteins. So attachment of this entire cell membrane itself to the cytoskeleton by the help of proteins. Okay, so these are all the specific function of the cell membrane proteins. Okay, coming to the another topic, water movement through this membrane. Okay, let us discuss first diffusion concept. So this you can feel when a person comes with the perfume sprayed, automatically you can recognize that there is a order that is distributed evenly. So that is the concept of diffusion, and exchange of gases between the cells also takes place by this phenomena. It is a spontaneous movement of a substance from a region of higher concentration to the lower concentration. Okay, so it mostly applies to the gaseous molecules. And same concept when you are talking about the water movement, so we call it as osmosis. But in osmosis you can see there is a membrane, semi permeable membrane, that is separating high concentration and low concentration regions. That is how the passage of water from a region of high water concentration through a semi permeable membrane to a region of low water concentration. So you see this low water concentration. Okay, so this is important, and this you can observe with the dried resins. Will be when you are putting that dried grapes or something into the water, it will be swelling up. So because of the osmosis process, and also absorption of water by the plant root is also by this phenomena. Okay, so this is what ultimately the osmosis that is occurring inside the cell. Okay, and because of this there is a concept of osmotic balance. By osmosis of water, the osmotic balance ensures that the optimal concentration of electrolytes and non-electrolytes required by the cell. Okay, so ions, electrolytes, majorly ions, Na plus, Ca2 plus, all these ions which are very much essential for the cell, that has been balanced. Solutes or water move across the semi-permeable membrane, causing the solution on either side of it to be equalized in concentration. And there is, in osmosis you can see the three specific type of states, if you consider a cell as well as its external environment. Okay, let us start with this word isotonic solution. You can see concentration inside, you can call itself, it is like solute concentration you can consider here now. So if you see concentration is equal, at that time no movement of water, cell will be at happiest state. Cell means you consider any cell, okay, with cell membrane. And there is another condition called as hypotonic. So less solute outside the cell than the inside the cell. Okay, if you keep a dilute solution outside the cell, so that will be the condition. Then what happens, water will be more. If you are keeping dilute solution means you can see it's less solutes here, water is more here, and what happens, water will be moving directly into the cell. So water rushes into the cell, and because of that cell may actually swell, or even it can burst. That means a cell is feeling bloated. And another condition that is called as hypertonic solution. So in that case you can see solute concentration is more, definitely water concentration is less, right? So in that case what happens, water from the cell comes out, because outside there is very high amount of solutes. So the one of the tendency of water is to dilute the solution, so definitely it comes out of the cell, and water rushes out of the cell, and cell may shrink here. Okay, so that is what, even cell may die also by shrinking. So that is how this state is unhappy for the cell. Okay, and you can understand this concept with these three specific slides, three figures here. Hypotonic solution, where the net water gain happens, water moves inside the cell and cell swells. And hypertonic, you can see hyper, you can remember with the solute concentration, too much high concentration outside the cell, so that is how water rushes out of the cell, and net loss of water takes place, and cell shrinks. Okay, and no net loss or gain in the case of isotonic solution. Yeah, same concept explained with some more technical terms here. Isotonic solution, where you don't have any movement of water, equal amount of water entering or leaving, you can call, because this is a balanced state. Okay, this is what we call even osmotic balance inside the cell. Okay, so hypotonic solution, again you can see where the condition is water entering inside the cell and cell is bulging. It is also called as cytolysis. Okay, the technical term, another technical term for hypotonic solution is cytolysis. And hypertonic solution, so you know that cell is moving out of the cell and this cell will shrink. So the plasma, you can see that plasma of the cell is looking like a shrink state, so that you can call it is plasmolysis. Okay, so these are all the technical terms which are involved in this different state of the cell. Thank you.